So before we start thinking about strengthening of the hip, we have to work on trying to restore our range of motion. That way we have a amount of motion that we can strengthen within. So um, thinking about how our feet and our hips tie in together. And so some of the things that we did for the foot area is going to be really pertinent now. They're going to look kind of similar, but then we'll be able to kind of build off of that just a little bit. The other thing that I want you to kind of think about is if there's directions of motion that we're limited with, oftentimes we don't go directly after those motions. We may pick a different direction to help restore some fluidity, help mobilize the joint space a little bit, and then go after the spaces that are a little bit more limited. But in general, this is kind of my thought process as far as try to get some sort of rotation going, because some sort of rotation oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes will then feed into a little bit better lateral motion. And then once we're able to work on a little bit of lateral motion, kind of getting the hips thinking about stability in that direction, then we usually feed into a little bit better extension for push off and walking or stepping forward. So that's usually my thought process with that, but it may have to shift a little bit in case someone's really limited with rotation because of pain or discomfort from either arthritis or a labral tear or something like that. I may not go directly at that. I may have to start with a little bit of backwards, or sorry, a little bit of lateral, or maybe we could work on stepping backwards to kind of help get that joint lubricated and moving before we work on internal rotation, external rotation. But we're going to kind of stick with the rotation, lateral component, and then how that then can feed into extension. So as we're working on this stuff, we got to think about our feet as well, as far as making sure we have good orientation and everything pointing forward. We're going to use our big toes to feel our arch space kick in so we know that we're grounded. And then from here, we're going to start with our pelvic motion. We're going to start with rotation. We're just going to work on a little bit of rotation right, rotation left. As I feel myself rotate to the right, like we've talked about before, we're going to feel that right arch come up. We're going to feel that right hip maybe tighten up a little bit. That's creating internal rotation, a motion that oftentimes people are lacking. And then as I go to the left, it's the same thing in the opposite direction. My left arch comes up, my left hip internally rotates while my right hip externally rotates a little bit. So we're working on those. We're mobilizing in that rotational direction of motion. Now from here, we're going to then feed that into the lateral direction. So we're going to take an open step here. And then if we can, a little bit of a slight lateral or a cross step. If you need something outside to help support you, that's all good. But we're working on opening that hip here and then closing it off. So when people have a little bit of that wider externally rotated base of support, their hips have a hard time rotating in and they have a hard time closing in on themselves. So we've worked on the rotation. Now with this little bit of lateral step, it helps open that hip before we try to then close in on it and narrow the base of support. We open and close. So then from there, we can oftentimes now start to work on a little bit more hip extension to where we kind of stay consistent with our stepping patterns. Now we're going to work on a 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock step, where we're thinking about grounding through the foot, allowing our body to transfer over that back foot, getting the knee to extend and the hip to extend. We're also getting some ankle dorsiflexion there. So we're getting all three components of everything extending forward, which is really going to help maximize our push off and our propulsion when we're walking, help improve our efficiency. So those are kind of the big things that I would be thinking about and that are easy to work on. So quick reminder, we're working on rotations here. If those rotations are pretty easy, we then can work on a little bit of a crossover step and open. From there, we're going to then have our lateral step, open and close. And then we're going to transition that into our reverse to forward step. So then we end with something that looks like walking. So then ultimately, we are trying to get more efficient and better safety and awareness with how we're walking. So now from here, how can we take some of those different movement patterns and start to put them into a strengthening piece? That'll be next.